So, Charlotte, would you please start by introducing yourself and then you can launch in whenever you're ready.
Okay. I am a retired, well, 99% retired psychoanalyst. I'm in Chicago now, but was a New Yorker. I was formerly program chair of the National Psychological Association for Psychoanalysis. I was assistant professor of pediatrics at New York Medical College, supervisor of social work training, New York Medical College, adjunct professor at Smith College School for Social Work, instructor at NYU School for Social Work in Hunter. Author of 3 books, and one is coming out shortly, a compendium of articles on psychoanalytic analytic theory and methodology, and a number written about 15 articles that were published. Okay. The history of anti-Semitism is a long and disastrous tale for humanity. Jews have suffered the consequences of this form of hatred and revile for centuries. I will attempt to demonstrate that the hatred of the Jews reflects both biopsychological mechanisms and the effects of social structures. Basically, hatred derives from aggression, a biological instinct universal for all humanity. All societies must organize and synthesize this aggressive drive in every aspect of their structure and function. Aggression has both positive and negative qualities and has been utilized by societies as both a protective and destructive force in order to maintain their integrative function. Peter Gay, a scholar of both social history and psychoanalysis, wrote a very erudite book, The Cultivation of Hatred, in which he indicated, quote, "The scars that aggression have left on the face of the past are indelible. Wars and rumors of war, class struggles, clashes between religious denominations or racial and ethnic groups, rivalries for place and power in political and business, in politics and business, the hatreds generated by nationalism and imperialism, the ravages of crime, the confrontations of private life, from marital discord to family feuds. All these and more offer pervasive testimony that aggression has supplied most of the fuel for historical action and historical change." End of quote. Certainly, the very idea that societies cultivate hatred suggests an anomaly. Why should any person, group, or society want to cultivate hatred? Is this not, hold on, let me just make sure. Okay. Okay, why should any person, group, or society want to cultivate hatred? Is this not the very emotion we would like to eradicate from our lives? Yet Gay suggested that hatred was not just an emotion that erupted spontaneously in our society, but rather social organizations utilize hatred for very specific purposes. As he indicated, hatred derives from aggression, an instinctual drive that is inherent in all humans and which expresses itself in both negative and positive behavior. That hatred is often viewed as a separate emotional entity from aggression is a theoretical error. It is a derivative of the aggressive drive and derives its qualitative characteristics both from its drive and the negative experiences in life. Whether we wish to conceive of aggression from a Darwinian concept, that of survival of the fittest, or a Freudian understanding that aggression is instinctual in nature, it is essential that we understand how civilizations have utilized and organized the pervasive nature of this aggressive drive. Societies have early recognized that in order to preserve human life, they had to control and structure the expression of aggression as it emerged in individual and group behavior. Thus, by legalistic means and cultural mores, societies established a code of external controls and social patterns. What's going on here? Can you turn off the picture? It's very disconcerting. Okay? All right. We may well ask, what is the nature of this aggressive drive that plays such havoc with the functioning of civilization and spontaneously appears as a necessary correlate to its survival? From the earliest development of mankind, aggression provided a protection against the destruction of the self and the group. It is a protective device without which we could not survive. Man's early history was a constant struggle for survival, both from the animals of prey and his own species. Certainly, we can observe this in animal behavior. Though man developed beyond the beasts of prey, the inherent force of aggression did not recede. It is important to note that aggression does not always imply a negative quality. Aggression is also a positive attribute in man's functioning. It accounts for our creative pursuits, both in work and personal relationships. The tillers of soil, the artists, the cooks, the mothers and fathers, all utilize this aggressive drive for the well-being of society and personal development. Yet there also exists a negative aspect to this drive. We are both witness and captive of aggression, whether perpetrated by external sources or internal conflagration. In fact, a primary factor in the history of civilization is a history of war and social conflict. Civilization, if I may anthropomorphize, has long recognized that the force of aggression cannot be eradicated, nor is individual or group control easily achieved. Issues of right and wrong succumb to revenge, and to kill one's enemy often assumes a moral imperative. We may well ask why this aggressive drive that plays such havoc with a peaceful development of civilization cannot be better controlled. Unfortunately, that which both that which once served a practical purpose, the survival of the individual, still holds within it the seeds of its own destruction. If to save oneself one had to kill the other, then the other became a constant source of danger to the self. So laws were devised whereby it was possible to both protect the individual or group and to punish the predator. It has not been possible to adequately control this aggressive drive. The aggressive instinct is basically qualified by the nature of social interaction, economic, political behavior, and a wide range of social ideology. Further, it is necessary to reiterate that society has devised many methods of organizing group attitudes to discharge aggression. One such device, if I may use a euphemism, was to find a quote convenient other. Freud had indicated this concept in his paper, Moses in Monotheism. He had stated that one of the grounds for hating the Jews is, quote, the circumstances that they live for the most part as minorities among other peoples. For communal feeling of group requires, in order to complete it, hostility towards some extraneous minority. and the numerical weakness of this excluded minority encourages its suppression. End of quote. Gay has also expostulated that, quote, nothing seems more natural than the case which humans can claim superiority over a collective, quote, other. For many reasons, the Jews have served the role of the convenient other, a legitimate rationale by a society's ethos in order to protect its own cohesion. By dispersing aggression outward to the other, the stranger, society attempted to minimize internal strife. In essence, social organizations have incorporated individual psychological mechanisms, specifically the mechanism of displacement. Of course, I am again anthropomorphizing society. This mechanism of discharging aggression to the other is in no ways limited to the unruly mob or the less educated. Our great hero of the Enlightenment, Voltaire, was vituperative toward the Jews as a common man in the street. He stated, quote, in short, we find in them only an ignorant and barbarous people. Jews were the enemies of mankind, end of quote. And Marx, who himself was Jewish, distorted the Jewish role in society and referred to them with venom. He rhetorically asked, quote, what is the object of the Jews' worship in this world? Usury. What is his worldly God? Money, end of quote. The diatribes against the Jews, the hatred, the poisonous lies of blood libel, the protocols of Zion, were spewed from the mouths of the educated, the Pope, the church ministers, and the literati. Unfortunately, we are all harbingers of aggression. Jews are not exempt either. At this juncture, I wish to discuss two psychological mechanisms that can enlighten our understanding of anti-Semitism. Freud, in his paper Beyond the Pleasure Principle, postulated the ego instincts and the death instinct. The aggressive drive was now a complement to the death drive. Drives are basic to psychological theory. The first of these concepts that is pertinent to our understanding of anti-Semitism derives from the ego instinct, is identification. Identification represents the capacity of a person to perceive aspects in another that resemble oneself, or reverse aspects of oneself in the other, and are pleasing to one's emotional state. We can either internalize those common elements as feeling part of the self, or externalize them and projecting them into the other. In either case, we feel a sense of identification. This process also applies to negative aspects of the self and other. And in this situation, the identification can assume a hostile and rejecting quality. Either of these emotional responses are aspects of identification and result either in a sense of simpatico with another or a feeling of rejection. We may conjecture that this mechanism, identification, supports survival of species from a reproductive standpoint and from a psychological position of binding people together. That we observe identification in individual relationships likewise exists to group functioning. The group is bound by a community of ideas, similarities in looks and behavior, powerful leaders that confer sameness. Thus, this binding of the group makes it possible to view the other as a different species. Freud spoke to the concept of narcissism of minor differences, by which he meant that minor differences could result in an injury to our sense of self. Differences seem to disturb our psychic equilibrium. I do not believe that this is simply a learned response that is taught because of political or economic reasons, even though hate for the other is used to further social goals. Hate or rejection of the other is a basic psychological response of distress, essentially caused by the unfamiliar. Furthermore, the concept of identification helps to understand how aggression to the other is permitted by the social order. We tend to love, to want to bond with the similar, and to reject that which appears different. Observe babies and the reaction to a stranger. There is initial fear, anxiety, and withdrawal. This component drive that emerges from the instinct for survival, is a component of the ego instinct. Perhaps this is a very primitive survival mechanism that is no longer adaptive in our current social development. Yet the outsider continues to be experienced as threatening to the individual, and unfortunately is likewise replicated in the larger group's affective responses. I will again speak in anthropomorphic terms by suggesting that society operates with unconscious mechanisms. We are all aware that society does not have an unconscious. It is rather organized by a history of written and oral traditions and attitudes reflected in its social and legal system. Freud had also indicated that by introducing the concept of a collective unconscious gains us little theoretical accuracy. And yet he does state, quote, the content of the unconscious indeed is in any case a collective, universal property of mankind, end of quote. Thus, we shall speak of society's unconscious. It happens that this social unconscious behaves on two levels, the cognitive and rational, and an opposite state of conflicting attitudes, prejudices, and destructive behaviors of which it is seemingly unaware. It is with this latter that it handles aggression and the mechanisms that infuse and diffuse this drive. The very idea of perceiving the Jew as vermin has given societies throughout history a sense of righteous killing, to hang the Jew, to burn him, to exile him without any sense of conscience are strange phenomena when the entire oeuvre of these societies bespeak of kindness, love one's neighbor, morality, justice, and the sanctity of human life. How can we understand this contradiction? Perhaps we can provide one answer by introducing the concept of defense, a psychological mechanism that operates in the mind as a means of maintaining psychic equilibrium, coherence, and a method of hiding the unpleasant. In anti-Semitism, we can observe a defensive functioning that permits contradictory states to exist in the psyche. This particular defensive mechanism, referred to as isolation, or uncommonly called splitting, permits the mind to keep apart ideas and behaviors that are in opposition to each other and to act one way or the other without undue distress in their apparent contradiction. In splitting, we can observe how this mechanism makes possible thinking and behavior with the least amount of exertion. It serves to conserve energy. Even killing that is absolutely justified requires this mechanism to operate. One must split off from his conscience that which can emotionally destroy, debilitate, or inhibit functioning. Unfortunately, we have corrupted this mechanism to permit murderous aggression. Thus, the church fathers, the Voltaires, can act with impunity and not assail their conscience. Another aspect of the role by which defense operates can be observed in the mechanism of projection. As we observe the role of negative identification, that is, those negative aspects of ourselves that we reject, we can see how the defensive role of projection plays out in anti Semitism. By projection, we observe ourselves, but not in a conscious manner, and thus we attempt to put into the other those characteristics that we reject. These psychic qualities that are viewed as bad, hateful factors that we wish to eliminate are easily projected onto the other. Since these hated qualities are frequently unconscious, that is unknown, we tend to try to throw them away, or maybe also transfer them onto another or a group. As we evaluate the role that anti Semitism plays in a society, we can observe how defensive projection plays a protective device in order to maintain a personal and social sense of integrity. The Jew has become the repository of all the worst qualities of mankind. He has been called rapacious, selfish, a usurer, and other adjectives reflecting human abhorrence. Thus, the convenient other is closely allied by identification, but is a negative other, the one whom you deny in yourselves. At this point, I want to speculate on the fact that the ancestry of the Christian religion from Judaism, the Baron, had to be aligned in order to enable the separation and to continue to maintain their independence. Initially, anti Jewishness' role in the separation process had served emotional and political purposes, but unfortunately, it was later exploited and justified itself as a righteous cause. As I have suggested, anti Semitism serves psychological, political, and economic purposes. It bolsters the power of the Catholic Church, other religious groups, and political hierarchies. And I'm going to skip some things. Okay. I'm going to add another psychological construct to my premise regarding the role by which anti Semitism has been utilized by society. I will suggest that anti Semitism is modern day civilization's totem and taboo, Freud's paper, 1930. That part of the totem which early societies revered and hated is no longer recognized in consciousness, but is well hidden in our psychic structures and the annals of society. What is evident are taboos, and the Jews are taboo. Freud has pointed out that taboos represent, quote, certain persons and things which are charged with a dangerous power which can be transferred through contact with them, almost like an infection, end of quote. They are, quote, dangerous and unclean. Freud further quotes the theorist one who indicated that taboo is nothing other than the objectified fear of the demonic power which is to be hidden in a taboo object. Perhaps what is most salient in Freud's discussion of totem and taboo is his contention that totems give expression to mankind's fundamental ambivalence between love and hate. That is aggression. Thus, the totem and the taboo represented a means by which early societies attempted to control destructive behaviors between persons, and especially their rulers. Of course, the conscious use of totems is long gone, that relics exist, and I am proposing that anti Semitism is a modern expression of the ancient totem and taboo relics. Okay. That the Jews have endured anti Semitism and resisted assimilation throughout history is a remarkable feat. What is there in the culture and the religious beliefs that have sustained this group identity? The Spanish Inquisition, the expulsions from many European countries, the ghettos, and finally the Holocaust, all have unleashed the destructive side of the aggressive drive against the Jew. And yet the Jew has maintained its internal cohesiveness. Is it the power of identification that maintained the group's cohesiveness, or the power of the positive aggressive drive that protects the individual against destruction by the other, or the strength of their convictions that they were, quote, the chosen people, and their stringent belief in one God? Perhaps we may hypothesize that a combination of many factors contribute to the strength of their convictions. In conclusion, I want to again reiterate how the role that the discharge of aggression, that is, the aggressive drive and the form of hatred, has played in anti Semitism, and the means by which organized society have deliberately utilized this hatred as a displacement from within the group to the other. Various, I'm sorry, various, I'm going to have to stop here. Okay, I'm finished. I just really want to say that societies have not been a good job of controlling wars, hatred, or anti Semitism. Okay, done. Thank you.